All right, in this lesson, we're going to talk about preliminary engagement activities. Now, what we're going to be doing in the next few lessons is kind of walking you through steps of the audit process. Now, we're not necessarily going through detail with them or just listing them, but we're kind of like going through an overview of the process of an audit, but then giving you a little bit of meat to it so you kind of understand what's going on. So in this lesson, we're talking about preliminary engagement activities. So things that we would do when we've accepted the client and we're now ready to kind of sign the engagement letter and get things rolling, okay? So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to know what personnel requirements does the audit engagement need. Now, obviously, we need to think about, hey, what proper training and proficiency are we going to need to get this done, knowing that auditors do not need to have all the skills necessary prior to starting the audit. So what we might do is we might go out to the scheduler. If I'm the partner in charge, I would then engage a manager or a senior manager, and then we would go to the scheduler and say, okay, we need these personnels in order to get this audit accomplished. Who do you have? Do they have the right training and proficiency? Can we rely on them for this audit? Do they have industry experience in this audit type? So we're kind of putting a plan together of the people that it's going to need to get that audit done. We're going to consider things like engagement risk. What's the risk of the engagement, and maybe who can help us mitigate that engagement risk? Specialty of the client. What's the client's specialty? Do we have anybody that we need to bring in because of that specialty that they do? Specialists. Do we need to bring in specialists? Who do we need to bring? Do we have their availability? Can we get them in when we need them in, or is it going to be a wait? If it's going to be a wait, then we have a little bit of an issue. What can we do while we wait for that specialist to come in and do their test work or testing or what it might be? Size of the company. We need to look at the size of the company and then tailor our personnel to the size. If we have a huge client, then we need a huge team. If we have a small client, then maybe we don't need as many people on the engagement team. The complexity of the audit will also dictate personnel requirements. So if it's a very complex audit, maybe we do need more personnel on it. If it's not a complex audit, maybe we don't need as many on it because it's going to be a standard, simple audit that we do. And then looking at personnel schedules, which is always the hardest. And hopefully these are kind of discussions we had prior to accepting the client is, okay, if we bring this client in, do we even have the resources, the personnel, the timeline to be able to do that? Okay, so these are things that we're thinking about as we figure out our personnel schedule and requirements. Once we have that, then we start to put those personnel in the schedule for that audit as they roll off other audits. Then we're also going to need to look at independence issues. We're going to look at the engagement level. The engagement level would be the personnel that works on the engagement. So typically most firms, what they do is they do an independence review sheet, or they do some type of independence annually, which gives a very broad overview of the independence issues that their employees would be facing. And so let's say I own stock in Microsoft. So then annually I'll put I own stock in Microsoft, or my parents is the head of Taco Bell, okay? And then Taco Bell comes to us and says, hey, we want you to audit. Well, what the scheduler can do is look in and see, okay, who can't work on a Taco Bell audit because of their independence issues? Take them off the board, okay? So then they're not on the table of who we're going to schedule for that audit. Who's going to work Microsoft? Well, if they say, okay, we want everybody who's not available, who's available but is not has an independence issue with Microsoft, they come off the board, and we only look at those that don't have independence issues. So we look at the engagement level, and then we look at the firm level, the entire firm as a whole. Are we providing other services, or do we have unpaid audit fees of the client? If that is, that's an independence issue, and we can't do the audit. So hopefully these are things that we're looking at before, but now that we've kind of started to engage the client, now we really need to look and see if we have any independence issues, and if we do, we need to find alternatives to it. The biggest one is, are they now an audit client because we've done other services for them, like consulting services, and now we need to figure out, okay, would we rather take the audit fees or the consulting services fees? And if it's a consulting service fees, then we need to decline the audit, okay? All right, and then the third thing we need to do is engagement relationship and engagement letter. We need to establish those terms of engagement. So this is kind of like, here's what we're about to do. Here's this engagement letter. Here is this document detailing what we're about to do and our agreement to the terms of our service. We call that an engagement letter in the audit industry. Every audit needs to begin with an engagement letter before we do any work with that client. What's in the engagement letter? Well, the engagement letter tells us who is responsible for what. So who's responsible for X versus who's responsible for Y. Typically things like the client is responsible for the financial statement. Our job is to review the financial statements or audit the financial statements. For material misstatements, our responsibility is not for the financial statements at the end of the day. Fees, it's going to talk about fees, what our timelines are. Are we going to use any specialists or specialists that we need? Work of internal audit, if we're going to rely on internal audit, what type of work might we rely on? Limited liabilities, giving us a little bit of room to say, hey, we're limited to these things and not all of your exposure to X, Y, and Z. Other services that we might provide. If we're able to provide them not because of independence issue, maybe we put that in there, or maybe we try to discuss other services we may provide to them. And then regulatory items, if there's regulatory items that we want to keep in their mind, like PCAOB compliance, then we need to put that in the engagement letter to call attention to that. And then the audit committee's role. What's the audit committee's role in this audit? For a private company, it might be different than a public company, but we want to be very front and saying, okay, the audit committee's role is that if we find issues of a fraud or error by management, we will go to you directly with those information and not necessarily go to management for that. So what's their role? So we're stipulating our terms of engagement, our agreement for the services we provide. So these are the three things we need to think about when we talk about preliminary engagement activities. I know there's a bunch more out there, but these are the three main ones. Figure out, do we have personnel requirements? Do we have any independence issues? And then what's the engagement letter? What's the formal contract which stipulates the terms of the engagement? Once we pinpoint those down, then we're in a good lockstep of what to do next. So this lesson is all about preliminary audit engagement and preliminary things that we need to do in preparation for this audit. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you like what you saw, make sure you press the thumbs up button that's right below here. If you have any questions, make sure that you leave a comment or that question in the comment box below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you press the subscribe button. It's just below me. Hey, if you want more videos like this, make sure you go to www.patrickleemsa.com to see more videos like this, or if you just want to learn more about accounting. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.